Shadow Hack. Chapter 251, The Switch to Ghost Bloodline. Li Yunmu didn't say anything further and collected the manuscript into his heavenly world. Everyone must forget about today's matter. Regardless of whether it is the Ghost King's body refining secrets or Devil's soul refinement. A hint of solemnity finally appeared in Li Yunmu's voice. All of the followers understood the reason behind his words and nodded with serious expressions. No one had thought that the treasures hidden in Devil's old nest would be so world-shaking. Except for the couple original manuscripts, there weren't any other precious treasure here. But if the news about these couple original manuscripts was leaked outside, then all the temporal layer, nirvana layer, and even some sage layer experts would go crazy like sharks who'd smelled blood. Thus, this matter had to be kept a secret. Given their present cultivation, they wouldn't need to cultivate Devil's soul refinement for a long time, so Li Yunmu didn't plan on revealing this higher-level cultivation method to his followers. As for the Ghost King's body refining method, that was all right. Although it was a temporal layer secret technique, at least it wouldn't cause a commotion like Devil's soul refinement. They then continued to look through the ancient copper box. It also contained Ghost Clan's inheritance method. Everyone flipped through it once and realized why Devil had made the decision to recultivate. This secret technique explained how a human could gain possession of Ghost Clan's bloodline, including the materials required and the way to transform one's bloodline. Everything was explained in complete detail. This secret technique was known as Ghost Inheritance. This secret technique couldn't be classified into any grade because it only allowed humans to transform into ghosts. In the ancient box, there were also several small porcelain bottles. When the group examined all of them one by one, they discovered that they were the materials required to transform into a ghost. Devil seemed to have been collecting them during the past few years, but he had still been lacking 2 or 3 materials. Who wants to become a ghost? Li Yunmu collected the box into his heavenly world and then spit out a mouthful of impure air. Underworld Hand said without any hesitation. Me too. I, Nangong, also want to switch. Within a short while, 3 of the 8 followers made their decision. They knew that all the cultivation methods and secret techniques which they had discovered just now would be more compatible with them after they switched to Ghost Bloodline. Flowing Cloud opened her mouth, but didn't say anything in the end. What concerned this extremely stunning woman, it was extremely hard to know what she was thinking. You don't have any special innate ability, so I advise you to switch to the Ghost Inheritance. Besides, the Ghost Clan might be affiliated with darkness, but that clan is still quite close to the human race. It won't have much influence on your situation, Li Qinghong suddenly said to Flowing Cloud. Flowing Cloud looked at the 4 people who had gotten a great boost in their strength after recultivating, then clenched her teeth and made the decision. Then I will switch. It was just as Li Qinghong had said. The reason why Li Yunmu hadn't taken the initiative to choose the 3 people to recultivate was mainly because Underworld Hand and them didn't possess the necessary qualifications. Li Qinghong possessed Sung God Bird's undying sage blood, while Lin Jian cultivated the blade intent of Bloody Wood and possessed extreme determination regarding his blade intent. He also had the blade whetstone to assist in cultivation, so he was a person with great future prospects. The reason behind choosing Barbarian needn't be explained. He was a person from the desolate continent, so he had merged with a bloodline upon awakening. If they hadn't found the king's true territory containing divine blood, then he would have remained an ordinary evolved human and couldn't be considered as outstanding. However, because of divine blood as well as having merged with the bloodline of mist fiends, he could now even stand in front of Li Qinghong. Among the 4, Demon was the most outstanding, but not because of his personal strength. It was because he could summon more than 2 amphibious sea beasts. Divine blood had polished his only skill, and so, in the future, he would also have great prospects. Now that they had found a great treasure, as long as they knew how to switch to the Ghost Bloodline, they would rise swiftly in the future. Li Qinghong didn't want her junior sister Flowing Cloud to miss such an opportunity. I will also switch. The person who also wanted to inherit the ghost bloodline was surprisingly demon. Apparently he wasn't satisfied with always relying on his sea beasts. That's good. Commit the 18 secret ingredients necessary for ghost inheritance usage to your memory, then use all your private resources to quickly find them. And thus, the mission to kill Devil was concluded. Although Li Yunmyo couldn't fulfill the goal of obtaining all 5 parts of the Azure Dragon deity suit, it wasn't like there had been much hope for it from the start. Thus, no one was really disappointed. On the contrary, Devil's treasures had already left all of them dumbfounded. Devil had really concealed himself too deeply. If Li Yunmyo hadn't possessed the 2 parts of Azure Dragon deity suit and used the female shadow ancestor, Devil would have probably escaped using ghostly image substitution. Maybe then he would have continued living in hiding by relying on the inheritances he possessed. In time, less than 10 years later, he would have appeared again as another extremely terrifying character. This had almost become a reality. But unfortunately for him, although he had gained a great opportunity, he didn't have great luck. He had been able to avoid frontline heaven, but he couldn't escape Li Yunmyo's hands. All followers sighed in pity for Devil. It wasn't that he didn't have good luck, it was just that it had been crushed by their master. Soon, Li Yunmyo led his followers out and disappeared from the cave. They didn't remain any longer in the death zone, and even the people dispatched by frontline heaven to secretly infiltrate the region and learn about Li Yunmyo's attitude couldn't discover even a trace of them. A day passed by. The 8 followers had used their personal resources to locate the secret materials which Devil couldn't find. Li Yunmyo had indeed been quite generous with his followers and granted them great freedom, including the power to keep control of the businesses they were engaged in before, to keep their wealth and relationships, resources to gather intelligence, and so on. He hadn't taken complete control of them. He allowed his underlings to have the freedom to expand their own power. He only needed to hold on to their soul imprint, the most core part of a human, that's all. Including the former third most powerful halted fluxer Nangang Gongzi, the group of 8 used all their private contacts to the fullest and quickly located 3 materials which Devil couldn't find. After this, only one ingredient remained. It was the rarest of them all, and they simply couldn't find its location. During this whole time, Li Yunmyo stayed within his heavenly world, undergoing the final preparations. Ghostly image substitution, ghostly evasion, Ghost King's body refining secrets, Devil soul refinement, Ghost inheritance. The 5 recently obtained original manuscripts had already entered the system's hoard of real-world secret techniques. After they were supplemented and repaired, cultivation relaying globes were being manufactured for all of them. Without any hesitation, Li Yunmyo immediately chose to cultivate ghostly image substitution first. Among all sage skills which he had grasped until now, this life-saving ability was comparable to only one, deity execution. However, deity execution couldn't be considered as his own skill, but the ability of the refined snow guzzle cold blade. Thus, if Li Yunmyo cultivated this sage-level secret technique, he would have one that was truly his own. And it wasn't hard for him to start cultivating it since he possessed the gold and black armor which allowed him to ignore the condition of possessing bloodline of the Ghost clan. After the first cultivation relaying globe of ghostly image substitution was manufactured, he immediately jumped into the cultivation space and began to try to grasp this skill. If he mastered this evasion technique, he wouldn't need any protection jades in the future. Chapter 252, 5 Lives. The conditions required to cultivate ghostly image substitution were extremely harsh. The first one was to possess the bloodline, the second to be innately perceptive regarding spatial attribute, and third was formidable comprehension. Only if the person had all 3 things would they be able to grasp the essence of this skill. Otherwise, even cultivation relaying globes would be of no use. Those whose perception regarding spatial attribute was weak, they could never learn this skill. This was the demanding nature of a supreme skill. The life wasn't so easy that anyone who wanted to cultivate could cultivate, and because of that, Now everyone who was in possession of this supreme evasion technique could cultivate it for their own life-saving purposes. Fortunately, with Li Yunmu's arrow evasion at the 6th outstanding level, his comprehension naturally wasn't weak. Moreover, with the golden Ghost King armor, the dimensional armor inherited from the Ghost clan, he could ignore the requirement for the bloodline. Thus, after entering the cultivation relaying globe and trying for roughly 87 times, he obtained the system's notification that he had grasped the basics of this supreme life-saving secret technique. And like for the Great Sun Tyrant body muscle marrow secrets, the cultivation for the first level was set at 10,000 points. Moreover, because it was a substitution technique, it required a medium to substitute for him. Thus, if Li Yunmu wanted to completely grasp the first level, he also required a resentful soul. As for its quality, the higher the better. With higher quality, the resultful soul would be more powerful, and would then be able to last longer while substituting for him. This would give Li Yunmu more time to flee. Ding! Because host possesses 8 shadows, once host cultivates the 8th level of ghostly image substitution, you won't need resentful souls. You will be able to use the 8 shadows to substitute for you and die in your place, the system aptly reminded him. Li Yunmu didn't want to accept this, but after some thinking, he understood the reason behind it. Regardless of whether it was a resentful soul or a shadow, both of them could act as mediums and take his place to die. The essence of the ghostly image substitution technique could be classified into 2 important points. First was evasion, which required formidable perception for the spatial attribute. Since Li Yunmu had cultivated the 6th level of arrow evasion and the true sight arrow blind shot of his archery foundation skill, he had developed quite a good perception. Therefore, this wasn't a problem. The second important point was the soul substitution. Li Yunmu thought for some time, but didn't settle on the shadows in place of resentful soul. Although each of his shadows could be resurrected 3 times each day, they were a part of his combat strength. Thus, he quickly took out a 12 Rainbow Light King's resentful soul and used it as a medium. This wouldn't be a simple decoy. The 12 Rainbow Light King's resentful soul was capable of enduring a lot and would give him sufficient time to escape. Either don't cultivate, or cultivate to the peak. Only the resentful soul of a 12 Rainbow Light King was suitable for this sort of supreme evasion technique. First level, 10,000 ability points, upgrade. Second level, 20,000 ability points, upgrade. Fifth level, 50,000 ability points, upgrade. After advancing to the 5th level, Li Yunmu relaxed for a moment. He had to use up 0,000 ability points to come this far, but fortunately, during the month he had stayed in the king's true territory, he had accumulated a large amount of ability points which would now come of use. After reaching the 5th level, he didn't cultivate any farther. It wasn't that he didn't want to proceed, but he didn't have any more resentful souls of king-level creatures. While living inside the king's true territory for a year, he had only exterminated 5 divine blood kings and nothing more. However, even then, if Devil learned that Li Yunmu had instantly cultivated to the 5th level, he would turn in his grave. It must be known that after training bitterly for so long, Devil had only attained the 1st level and was advancing toward the 2nd level. This was the real difference between Li Yunmu and other Fluxers. It wasn't nothing that he had relied on to kill enemies with 4 layers higher cultivation than him. He wouldn't have been able to kill more and more enemies as if they were chickens if not for one thing. The reason behind his strength was that since the beginning, all his cultivation methods and battle skills were never lower than B grade in terms of quality. Also, whenever he started cultivating one, he would instantly bring them up to the 10th level. This was the reason why he could battle with enemies who had higher cultivation. After all, as the skills became more profound, the time taken by others to cultivate them would increase exponentially, lasting even years. 5th level ghostly image substitution implied that Li Yunmu possessed 5 lives. No, if his own life was also counted, then he possessed 6 lives now. After he had successfully cultivated the secret technique, he couldn't remain in the heavenly world and immediately rushed to the wilderness to test it on monsters. When some 20 monsters encountered a human presence, they immediately rushed forth. But the next instant, Li Yunmu completely ignored them and unleashed the supreme evasion technique. When Li Yunmu entered the horde of beasts, he dashed right and left trying to break through their siege. At this time, for an instant he felt as if he had entered a special state. One after another, spatial channels appeared in the surrounding space. Li Yunmu hesitated for a moment, then chose the spatial passage on the northern side. It was his first time entering a spatial channel, and he felt as if he had lost all sense of time and distance within it. It felt as if many months and years were passing by, and at the same time as if only minutes were going by. Just when Li Yunmu was carefully examining this type of mystical experience of walking between the planes, a ray of light appeared in front of him, and the next instant he sobered up. Then he realized that he had returned back to the fifth dimension. Awesome mystical experience, it really deserves to be called a supreme evasion technique. Li Yunmu closed his eyes and carefully examined what he had experienced just a moment ago. For the first time, the feeling that he could casually walk through space rose in his heart. According to rumors, as long as a domain sage left an imprint in a planar space, they could travel through the void between space and instantly arrive there, as long as the location wasn't outside a certain range. Ding! You had a profound experience while traveling through the void. Your arrow evasion's proficiency has increased by 3,000 points. Ding! You had a profound experience while traveling through the void, which brought a small transformation to the true sight arrow. Requesting host to check personally. The two sudden notifications from the system caused a shiver to pass through Li Yunmu's heart. What the F***CK is this? He had barely experienced it one time and the proficiency of arrow evasion has already increased by 3,000 points? It must be known that all his foundation skills had reached at least the 5th level. After attaining it, increasing the proficiency by even 1 point was extremely difficult. However, even more surprising was that his true sight arrow had surprisingly transformed. Li Yunmu immediately opened his skills panel, and as he looked through it once, sure enough, he found something new. The system had added a new property to the explanation of the true sight arrow: clear vision. This skill provided him with the ability to see an enemy concealed within the void and unleash blind shot to kill him. Chapter 253, Patching Up Weak Points. When Li Yunmu looked at the explanation of the newly created clear vision ability, he exploded with excitement. Although there was only a little bit of possibility, as he familiarized himself with the ability and his understanding of it deepened, he might come to understand that principles of the void. When that time came, he might actually be able to bring the objects around him into the void. Li Yunmu wished to try it again and used the ghostly image substitution a few more times. However, he suddenly discovered that because he had just recently cultivated this technique, he couldn't use it many times in succession. He had to wait for some time before he could use it again. Thus, he could only drop this matter for the time being. System, where am I now? For how long had I been fleeing and how much distance did I cover? Li Yunmu suddenly asked. Host was in the void for 5 seconds. Distance covered is around 25 kilometers. Present location is the northwestern edge of Moro Mountain Tenebrous Hidden Domain, the system replied, having collected this data long ago. Once Li Yunmu heard it, he was startled. Good God, surprisingly I had only walked in the void for mere 5 seconds? Yet the distance I covered was 25 kilometers. Mother Faster, how could the skill be so formidable? Li Yunmu almost didn't dare to believe it. If Devil had used this awesome technique at that time, he probably would have been able to escape past the discs. This is quite normal. Devil had cultivated this ghostly image substitution only to the 1st level, so he could have at most traveled in the void for 1 second, covering a distance of 5 kilometers. Host has presently cultivated the ghostly image substitution to the 5th level, so whether it's the amount of time or movement speed, it is 5 times that of the opponent. The system then quickly spread out a rough data map pertaining to each level's cultivation of ghostly image substitution in his subconsciousness. While contrasting them, Li Yunmu saw that at the highest, 99th level, he could move at a speed of 100 km per second. He was flabbergasted. Doesn't this mean that if I cultivate this supreme evasion technique to the peak that in a minute and a half I'll be able to cover 10,000 kilometers? The diameter of Earth was roughly 12,700 kilometers. If he cultivated the supreme evasion technique to its pinnacle, then he could go from one extreme to another one, from northern to the southern hemisphere in less than 2 minutes. For a moment, Li Yunmu felt as if he was seeing a whole new world that opened in due to flux cultivation. It's so formidable. Could he achieve this kind of speed when he cultivated to the domain sage layer? It was unimaginable. Until now, even if Li Yunmu's combat strength was formidable and his one punch could blow away the enemy, it could only cause the ground to sink by a few meters and no more. Although his defense was formidable, to the point that he received the title of the most difficult to kill in the fifth dimension, he could barely stand ground against a homing missile by relying on the power of his flesh. Because of that, Li Yunmu felt that he still could be seen as a human. However, after cultivating the ghostly image substitution, he had a sensation as if he had entered an all-new higher domain. Traveling 10,000 kilometers in an instant, how could a human accomplish this? It simply couldn't be done by any human. How could the disparity between a domain sage and a flux disciple be so large? Originally, he had believed that Admiralty cover, this top-notch A-grade cultivation method was sufficiently monstrous compared to other human cultivation methods, but now he became aware that supreme cultivation methods were really too terrifying. On this night, it was like heavens had opened a new door for Li Yunmu. He felt as he had touched the doorstep of another world, and his feelings were complicated regarding it. He used ghostly evasion several times and become more proficient with it. However, this temporal layer fleeing skill wasn't as heart-palpitating as ghostly image substitution, this supreme secret technique. Ghostly evasion could still be seen as human-like. After system had absorbed this secret technique, it decided that it was an S-grade secret technique, while ghostly image substitution was considered as an SSS-grade supreme technique. As for the Great Sun Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow secrets which Li Yunmu had cultivated previously, it was SS grade. Originally, the temporal layer secret techniques were all assessed to be in the category of supreme grade techniques, although only lower grade supreme techniques. The Great Sun Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow secrets were considered middle grade, while ghostly image substitution was seen as the highest grade supreme technique. It was then no surprise that its effects were so inhuman. Li Yunmu had finally found a clear and distinct comparison between the real-world secret techniques as well as systems cultivation methods. Cultivating ghostly evasion was clearly simpler compared to an SSS-grade ghostly image substitution. It didn't require any objects to act as medium, only ability points. The first level only required 5,000 ability points, the second level 10,000, while the third 15,000, and the 10th 50,000. Just 50,000 were required for the first major boost in strength. Li Yunmu looked at the more than 200,000 ability points remaining after advancing ghostly image substitution and, without any hesitation, instantly advanced the skill's cultivation by 10 levels. It required 245,000 ability points in total. After reaching the 10th level, ghostly evasion allowed him to transform into a black line, and the distance covered by him each second would over 100 meters. He would then be faster even than wings of the wind. This was a bad comparison, though. Since this skill was an evasion technique, its consumption of flux energy was huge, and it couldn't be used for long time. Li Yunmu attempted it once, and discovered that with his rainbow crystal layer's flux energy, he could only use it for a little more than 2 minutes. After 3 minutes had passed, his flux energy was completely exhausted. Thus, right then, even if he had a temporal layer skill at his disposal, with his current level of strength, he couldn't fully display its effects. No wonder Devil had abolished his cultivation and cultivated the 12 Rainbow Light King crystal armor. First, it allowed him to display the might of Azure Dragon leg guards which would be propelled by the King Rainbow Lights. Second, if his flux energy was boosted by 12 Rainbow Lights, then it could somewhat support the secret techniques of the Ghost Clan. Li Yunmu hadn't yet congealed any Rainbow Lights, so the amount of flux energy he possessed couldn't be compared to what real Rainbow Crystal Layer powerhouses had. After cultivating 2 fleeing and life-saving techniques in succession, Li Yunmu felt as if something was different now. Those skills could be classified as part of his foundation, and they didn't depend upon external forces. Thus his confidence surged greatly. But this wasn't sufficient, for the Continental battle was going to start in less than 2 days. He still needed to increase his strength. Currently, he didn't care about increasing his combat strength but his ability to survive. System, given my present situation, what's my current weak point that needs patching? If any outsider heard this, they would probably wish to die. The current Li Yunmu was already acknowledged as the most difficult to kill person in the 5th dimension, a person with unrivaled defense, and now this F***er still wanted to strengthen another of his weaknesses? He simply wouldn't let other people have any benefits. However, since he had the system, if he didn't use it, that would be pure stupidity. The system quickly did a focused analysis and the final result was that Li Yunmu currently lacked a high-speed regeneration and endurance restoring cultivation method. Once Li Yunmu heard this, he wanted to obtain it as quickly as possible. And why should he stop at a top-quality A-grade skill? Why shouldn't he refine and merge 3 top-quality A-grade skills to create another supreme technique? He immediately decided to act and checked the amount of space elements in his possession. At this moment, he still had 47,000 space elements. Without any hesitation, he selected endurance restoring and high-speed regeneration A-grade cultivation methods and quickly refined them. Instantly, 29,799 space elements were deducted from Li Yunmu's collection, and within his consciousness 21 A-grade cultivation methods began to rotate around his consciousness. Chapter 254, Major Reversal. 21 A-grade cultivation methods were revolving around Li Yunmu's consciousness, dazzling him. Finally, with the system's recommendations, Li Yunmu chose 3 of them which were classified as Plant Essence Recovery, Innate Healing, Latent Talent Reversal. Plant Essence Recovery was an extremely demonic regeneration technique. Li Yunmu took a liking to it upon first glance. When using this technique, he could absorb the essence of plants and trees and recover the stamina and strength of his body. As his cultivation increased, the vitality absorbed from trees and plants would recover him more and more efficiently. It was an unusually effective recovery cultivation method. Innate healing was even more profound compared to plant essence recovery. The main principle behind this method was that the cultivator who practiced it would use it at normal times to absorb the vitality of different living things and then nurture it within his body. When the said cultivator encountered danger, he could draw out that vitality absorbed previously and use it to heal himself. The only harsh requirement for cultivating this method was that at normal times, the cultivator would have to devour a lot of treasure herbs or beasts with formidable vitality to absorb it. Only then would the ability's effects transform it into innate grade vitality and store it within the body for future use. Because of such a requirement, if it was any other ordinary fluxer, then they couldn't really cultivate it because the price for it would be too enormous. Latent Talent Reversal WA an emergency treatment technique. When it was unleashed, it would exploit the body's potential and consider it as a price to heal the cultivator's injuries at the most crucial time. This reversal technique also had a demanding condition: the person's body constitution had to be sufficiently formidable. Otherwise, if the body's hidden potential was drawn out, not only wouldn't it achieve the emergency treatment effects, but it would also cause the injuries to become even more serious, leading to the user's death. Apart from this, there was another hidden side effect. Once it was unleashed, it would exploit the body's potential and use it for emergency treatment. So although the cultivator's life would be saved, he would become weaker to a certain extent. Li Yunmu's flesh was sufficiently formidable, even unusual so. Due to that, he wasn't afraid of becoming weaker after the emergency treatment, which would certainly happen. Given his formidable body constitution, the slight weakness in exchange for saving his life in emergency was well worth it. This technique was clearly specially prepared for those with formidable body constitutions. The most important thing was that Li Yunmu wasn't going to just cultivate this reversal technique but the combination of the above-mentioned 3 life-saving techniques. According to the system's analysis, after these 3 techniques were combined, they would influence each other and achieve a qualitative upgrade. System, merge them. At this moment, Li Yunmu was quite excited. After spending nearly 30,000 space elements, he would create a cultivation method to strengthen the healing and recovery of his body from the 3 cultivation methods. This implied that whenever he got caught in a dangerous situation in the future, he would possess the capital to reverse it. The next instant after he said his words, the 3A grade cultivation methods were finally combined to form a supreme secret technique: Plant Essence Innate Healing Reversal. Quality SSS grade. The result of combining the skills surpassed Li Yunmu's expectations. He hadn't anticipated that this new supreme technique would be even more domineering and inhuman than Great Sun Tyrant Body Muscle Marrow Secrets, which was SS grade. When Li Yunmu examined the Plant Essence Innate Healing Reversal, he was instantly drawn towards this formidable secret method. It had 3 major abilities. First, it could absorb the vitality of trees and plants, which could be used to quickly recover the stamina and strength. This didn't have any healing effect, but it was extremely important and powerful. It would come into use at the most dangerous time when Li Yunmu would have exhausted all his flux energy. This ability would then ensure that he could last in the fight just by relying on his physical strength. It meant that as long as there were plants and trees in the surroundings, Li Yunmu would never run of energy and wouldn't become weary, thus greatly guaranteeing his endurance in combat. Accurately speaking, this was a formidable and extremely important function. Apart from this, the Plant Essence Innate Healing Reversal still had 2 other important effects. One of them was that it could store the vitality of living beings. This would turn Li Yunmu's body into a container which could store vitality absorbed from precious herbs and high-quality food which he would consume at normal times. The other one was self-heal. This ability was linked with the previous one of storing vitality. As long as he had sufficient vitality stored in his body, regardless of what kind of injuries he suffered, they would quickly be healed. As for the speed and effect of this self-heal, it depended upon the Plant Essence Innate Healing Reversal. As Li Yunmu cultivated this supreme technique to higher levels and his understanding of it became more profound, its healing speed would become faster and the effects more formidable. The above-mentioned was the terrifying healing effect of the SSS grade technique. However, just on the basis of these 3 abilities, it still couldn't enter the SSS grade. Thus, apart from these 3 abilities, it still had 2 more concealed effects. First was called Minor Reversal and the second was called Major Reversal. When Minor Reversal was unleashed, it could easily remove minor poisons, fatigue, as well as injuries. Major Reversal was for more important matters. It was a genuine life-saving, surviving, and emergency treatment technique. As long as Li Yunmu didn't die and had breath in him, after unleashing Major Reversal, he could rescue himself. Apart from saving his own life, he could also save the lives of others with it. There were simply no words to describe this ability. What would leave people gobsmacked if they knew about it was that Major Reversal wasn't just a life-saving technique, it could actually snatch back someone's life right from the gates of hell. And it could even detoxify the most powerful poisons. In short, apart from being able to regrow limbs, Major Reversal was like the highest quality of healing medicine. Naturally, the more formidable the effect, the higher the price one has to pay. Thus, the threshold for unleashing Minor Reversal was that the cultivator had to have attained the 3rd level of Plant Essence Innate Healing Reversal. Otherwise, he wouldn't have sufficient vitality to unleash this skill. As for Major Reversal, the person needed to have reached the 10th level. But even if they had attained it, they would have barely crossed the threshold, and just utilizing major reversal once would exhaust all the vitality within their body. Chapter 255, Even wishing for death is impossible. This time, I will become truly unkillable. After comprehending plant essence innate healing reversal, this SSS grade technique, Li Yunmu understood how monstrous and heaven-defying it was. Moreover, after being combined with the ability to store vitality, the side effect of becoming weaker was also diminished, as long as he had sufficient vitality in reserve. Thus, right then, Li Yunmu was basically unkillable. If other people knew that in addition to his defense and an SSS grade skill ghostly image substitution, this wastrel had also cultivated another supreme secret technique, probably not only Flux disciples, but even Flux masters would feel despair. As a matter of fact, it had been less than half a year since Li Yunmu had started cultivating. Perhaps he hadn't accumulated a profound foundation and wasn't the most threatening person, but his combat strength was certainly the greatest. No one could compare to it. Therefore, his 5 lives in addition to his endurance and endless combat strength would be pure nightmare for his enemies. Li Yunmu decided to cultivate plant essence innate healing reversal immediately. This SSS grade skill he had obtained after using all his space elements also had 99 levels. The amount of ability points required to cultivate the first level was 10,000. Li Yunmu was prepared to cultivate to the 10th level right away, but when he tried to use the ability points to advance his cultivation, he discovered that he couldn't upgrade this skill. Reminder, because host is cultivating an SSS grade supreme cultivation method, you require a material from which you could absorb life essence. Without it, you won't be able to advance your cultivation. The system promptly stated some crucial information. How can that be? Li Yunmu was startled. But very quickly, he came to understand it. For the real world's cultivation methods, attaining an SSS grade would mean that they had truly become supreme sage level cultivation methods. If temporal layer cultivation methods were only S grade and ordinary sage level secret techniques were SS grade, then SSS grade or higher would mean that the method is at a supreme sage level. As for why they were considered supreme, that's because they were the pinnacle level cultivation methods. Li Yunmu remembered that other SSS grade skill, ghostly image substitution, he had cultivated previously had required resentful souls as the medium. Plant essence innate healing reversal, which was also an SSS grade cultivation method, required some material which could be the medium as well. And this medium would be the stored vitality, in other words, the power of life he had stored up. After figuring this out, Li Yunmu took out a small bottle from his storage batch. Inside the bottle were 30 nourishment pills which were called life-preserving food pills. One of these pills would provide nutrition and energy required for 1 day. A single bottle was meant to last a month. Li Yunmu had stored several bottles of such nourishment pills in his storage batch. If he got stuck in some place where he couldn't find food, he could rely on these pills to last him for a whole year. He now took out several pills and swallowed them to store up vitality which could be absorbed from them. However, he discovered very quickly that they had low efficiency. Even after consuming 37 pills, the system still stated that the amount of stored vitality wasn't enough to cultivate to the first level. Finally Li Yunmu hardened his heart and pushed 100 pills into his mouth like they were candy. The system then relayed the information that he could cultivate to the first level. Finally. After eating nearly 100 nourishment pills, he had accumulated only enough for the first level. Li Yunmu burped a few times. He was now aware that even if these nourishment pills were purer than ordinary food, they were far from sufficient to allow him to cultivate the reversal cultivation method. Since the nourishment pills were insufficient, then he would switch to herbs. Soon, he fished out another small bottle. Inside it were 3 longan fruit-sized pills and swallowed them. And sure enough, as he had expected, the 3 pills were worth much more. With them having given him a large boost in vitality, he immediately cultivated to the second level. The 3 pills were equal to 100 nourishment pills he had taken previously. However, this grade of supplements also wasn't sufficient. After some hesitation, a hint of ruthlessness rose in Li Yunmu's heart, and he took out a mountain ginseng he had obtained from an enemy. Then, without caring the least bit whether his body would negate it or not, he ate it straight away. All of it was transformed into vitality essence and stored. A few hundred-year matured ginseng which had quite a high value allowed his cultivation to reach the 4th level. 4th level? My God! Li Yunmu's head began to ache. It showed up that as his cultivation advanced, the amount of stored vitality required to cultivate higher increased as well. Li Yunmu instantly dispelled the thoughts of consuming other precious and expensive herbs. He wanted to cultivate to the 10th level, but given the rate at which the amount needed to reach the next level was increasing, even if he used up all the precious herbs he had in his storage batch, it would still prove to be insufficient. Suddenly, he saw a thumb-sized green crystal bottle from the corner of his eye. Sacred life water. Yet as his heart jumped at the thought, he forcefully calmed it down. Although using sacred life water could give him lots of vitality, it would be a little too wasteful of him. After all, as long as he continued to eat the flesh of beasts with formidable vitality, he would accumulate the necessary amount sooner or later. However, the thing he didn't have the most right then was time. After a bit of hesitation, he took out the bottle of sacred life water and turned his head upward to swallow a drop of it. Instantly, the effects were easy to see. After swallowing one drop of sacred life water, Li Yunmu had obtained a notification from the system that he had the qualifications to cultivate to the 13th level. From 4th level to 13th one, this was the effectiveness of one drop of sacred life water which contained enormous amount of life force. It was thus no wonder then that just 5 drops of it would be enough for an ordinary person to regrow his limbs. 1st level, 10,000 ability points. 2nd level, 20,000 ability points. 13th level, 130,000 ability points. In a heartbeat, Li Yunmu had poured in a large amount of ability points. 930,000 of them vanished in an instant, leaving none behind. However, when Li Yunmu checked his profile panel created by the system based on the data gathered, he saw that minor reversal and major reversal had finally begun to shine, shedding their grayed-out colors. Haha, F***ing finally, the 13th level was reached. Li Yunmu took a deep breath. The 13th level of plant essence innate healing reversal meant that he could use minor reversal 4 times in succession or 1 major and 1 minor reversal. This should be enough for the time being. In the future, after he accumulated even more vitality essence which could act as his reserves, he would advance further, but now it wasn't necessary. Thus, Li Yunmu didn't devour the last 2 drops of sacred life water and put the bottle back into his storage batch. Chapter 256, Continental Battle begins. After the SSS grade Supreme Technique reached the 10th level, it didn't produce any special property. After all, it was already a supreme cultivation method, it had already reached perfection. After the successful cultivation, Li Yunmu immediately pressed his palm against a random tree in the hidden domain. The next instant, plant essence innate healing reversal was activated, and the several meters tall tree began to wither at the speed visible to the naked eye. In exchange, Li Yunmu's vitality filled up. He felt as if he had swallowed a powerful supplement. Afterwards, he lied down to take a nap, and when he woke up, his condition had already reached the peak. He was feeling extremely energetic. Then what about my regeneration ability? Now that he had attained the 13th level of plant essence innate healing reversal, he was wondering how fast was his healing. The next instant, he relaxed his flesh and revoked Admiralty cover, King Crystal armor, and other defenses for a moment. Then he took out a B-grade sharp knife and ruthlessly slashed at his hand, injuring himself. The injury wasn't great, only a few centimeters deep, almost equivalent to when ordinary people cut themselves with a knife. Blood began to flow out incessantly, but it wasn't serious. After doing this, he began to carefully observe his injury. A warm current began to flow forth from his abdomen, and he noticed that blood stopped flowing from the injured palm in less than 3 seconds. After a minute, the injury began to show signs of closing up. After 3 minutes, only a scar remained, and after more than 4 minutes, the wound vanished completely. Li Yunmyo carefully observed his palm once again. It was as if the injury had never existed in the first place. Formidable, this regeneration ability is too formidable. System, use the data to analyze how powerful my regeneration is and how much stored vitality did I use up now. According to the recently collected data, Host's regeneration ability is roughly 13 times more formidable than that of Fluxus white cells and 39 times compared to that of ordinary people. During the regeneration process, you have consumed roughly 3 points of stored vitality essence. It has to be said that with the assistance of the system, Li Yunmyo was in complete control of his body's condition, to the extent which could cause people's hair to stand up in astonishment. 13 times that of Fluxus white cells? 39 times that of ordinary people? Li Yunmyo finally understood the awesomeness of this cultivation method. It must be known that after awakening, Fluxus white cells became 3 times more powerful than those of ordinary people. However, after Li Yunmyo had cultivated to the 13th level, his regeneration ability had become 13 times that of Fluxus, not to mention, it was nearly 40 times compared to that of ordinary people. It must be known that after entering the Flux Master realm, those people only had 5 times higher regeneration compared to ordinary people. Yet Li Yunmyo had already surpassed them greatly in this respect. If his cultivation became even more profound and he cultivated his regeneration ability to the peak one day, then wouldn't it become 99 times greater than that of Fluxus and nearly 300 times than that of ordinary people? If he could cultivate to this level, then there would remain no word in human vocabulary to describe him. 300 times better regeneration, how far off would that be from deities? At that time, if he slashed his palm, the wound would be perfectly fine in less than 3 seconds. It would be even fiercer than what he had imagined. After all, the extraordinariness of 300 times faster couldn't be understood just by something imagining something 300 times greater. This amount was basically enough to trigger a fundamental change. However, Li Yunmyo's sort of thinking about this was perhaps still conservative. Unkillable, I'll be almost unkillable as long as I'll have an unending flow of life force as reserve. During the next 2 days, Li Yunmyo prepared like crazy for the Continental battle. He spent 999 space elements to purchase an A-grade technique from the system. Currently, he had Insect Step which had attained the 5th level and Ghostly Evasion, so according to reason, he was extremely proficient in the field of speed and agility. But Li Yunmyo still wasn't satisfied. He still followed the motto of either don't do it or do it perfectly, without any flaws. He hadn't reached the flawless stage of battle sages, but he could strengthen all his weak points. Therefore, he chose a technique called Spirit Pincer Step to supplement his deficiency in the field of bursting forth with high speed. If Ghostly Evasion was a secret technique which allowed him to surpass his ordinary movement speed and flexibility, and Insect Step dealt with agile movements in small range, Spirit Pincer Step focused on fiercely bursting with power to rush forth in a straight line. It was faster, more ferocious, and frightening compared to Charged Assault's burst power. Furthermore, compared to Charged Assault which he had comprehended previously, he still had a certain amount of flexibility in changing directions. It wasn't as bizarre and nimble as Insect Step, but it was fiercer. As the name implied, it allowed him to rush forth with extreme fierceness, like a giant pincer would. With this footwork technique, Li Yunmyo would certainly turn into a complete nightmare for people in the battlefield. He took a deep breath and immediately upgraded it to the 10th level, which produced a new ability, Spirit Pincer Rib. Once Li Yunmyo became slightly proficient in this killing technique, he tried to find a few dimensional beasts to test it. Once he did so, he was left greatly astonished. The ability produced by the Spirit Pincer Step after reaching the 10th level was surprisingly an extremely offensive technique. Once Li Yunmyo unleashed it with Spirit Pincer Step towards an enemy, it would look as if extremely savage pincers had burst forth to catch their victim. The burst of speed provided Li Yunmu with power a few times higher than his usual. He could now easily tear a powerful several meters high gigantic dimensional beast into two. After Spirit Pincer Steps cultivation had reached the 10th level, Li Yunmu sensed that this skill was really too frightening. He then immediately hardened his heart and upgraded it to the 20th level. After attaining the 20th level, the offensive ability Spirit Pincer Rip allowed Li Yunmu's arms to burst forth with an even more frightening power. After this, Li Yunmu came out of his heavenly world, ending his cultivation. The time left before the Continental battle was just one night. It had been said that because of trying to increase his strength for the past 2 days, he was already a little late in coming out. Master, all the powers in the outside world have started dispatching their troops. Like an obedient maid, Flowing Cloud appeared next to him with a towel in her hand and made this report. Don't worry. We all will also leave tonight. Li Yunmu wiped off his face, then asked, is there any major news from the outside, since the Continental battle is about to begin? There has been no news at all, except one. The 6 transcending powers and Fluxor Association had made a joint declaration that from today until the end of Continental battle, no person or power is allowed to kill a contestant who had obtained the qualifications to enter the tournament. If anyone violates this, they will suffer a combined attack from the 6 transcending powers as well as the Fluxor Association. Everyone related to the perpetrator or the power behind them will be exterminated to the last person. The words of Flowing Cloud caused a huge upheaval in Li Yunmu's heart due to astonishment. 6 transcending powers and the Fluxor Association had declared something together. This level of power was simply unprecedented, so no wonder everyone had quieted down. It seemed that the influence of the heavenly transformation was even greater compared to what he had imagined. That's good, assemble everyone. We will immediately return to the real world, this very night. Chapter 257, Li Sect appears again. Black Dragon Island was present on the border of the Northern Continent and the Holy Spirit Continent. It was roughly 336 kilometers long and 179 kilometers wide. According to historical records, Black Dragon Island had mysteriously appeared one night after humanity had entered the Dark Ages. However, no one had been able to find out about its origins. Many people said that after the dimensional shooting star descended on Earth, the rupturing of the continental plate triggered large changes on the ocean bed, and the island had thus floated up. Many others said that the legendary Black Dragon Island was a corpse of a gigantic black dragon. There were many stories surrounding its origins, filled with legends and superstitions. Many explorers had tried to examine it, but none of them returned. After entering the dimensional age after the Dark Ages, there were many flux masters and even flux sages, including even some domain sages, who had tried to explore the Black Dragon Island. But like those before them, they also never returned. Thereupon, the Alliance of the 6 Continents formally declared it as a forbidden place on Earth, which meant that this was an island where humans couldn't go. Regardless of whether one was an ordinary person or a powerful flux sage, once they entered it, they wouldn't return. Even the quasi-deity level battle sages were unwilling to step foot onto the island. But today, it had become the center of attention of every person on Earth. It had actually become the location of this year's Continental battle. In a short while, all the media of the 6 continents crazily rushed toward the island in succession. The online platforms, in the meantime, were filled with numerous confusing and frightening thoughts. Are they crazy? I didn't hear wrong, did I? I heard from many reliable sources that this year's Continental battle's location is Black Dragon Island. Yes, I also didn't dare believe and confirmed it 3 times. But wasn't this Black Dragon Island the most frightening forbidden island on Earth? According to rumors, even battle sages didn't dare to step foot on it casually. There are many locations where battle sages who are considered quasi-deities by the humans didn't dare to enter casually. But all of these terrifying locations were in the 7th dimension. On Earth, the only location where they did not dare venture was this Black Dragon Island. This birthed a lot of rumors and legends, which made sure that the island remained remote and unexplored. Now though, on the day the Continental battle was about to begin, the Alliance had declared the island as the battlegrounds. This kind of last-moment revelation shocked many people. Many were thus doubtful whether they had heard right. But they hadn't heard wrong, this information was completely authentic. It was soon reported that more and more candidates who had obtained the qualification for this Continental battle as well as the troops dispatched by the organizations behind them were all hurrying over there. I've heard from many sources now. It really is Black Dragon Island. Reportedly, the Alliance just announced that it is removed from the list of Forbidden Islands. Yes, my elder sister is within the upper echelons of Heavenly Nature City's Fluxer Guild, and she informed me just a moment ago that someone had discovered that the black fog which enveloped the Black Dragon Island throughout the entire year had started to become thinner. By now, many Fluxers have already entered it. Dang, it really is true. Did the heavenly transformation trigger these changes in the Black Dragon Island? There is this possibility. Li Yunmu, who was also advancing towards the Black Dragon Island, schemed through the information on the online platforms. The system had also gathered a large amount of data and analyzed it as deeply as possible. When Li Yunmu looked at it, a shiver passed through his heart. Perhaps most of this was nonsense and there wasn't any reliable information, only speculations, but maybe, the huge changes on Earth had been triggered by this Forbidden Island. No person on Earth was familiar with the Black Dragon Island because it was a place where even battle sages didn't dare to set foot. But now, numerous explorers and powers were going crazy over it. At this time, Li Yunmu was seated in an enormous flying palace which was like an enormous hall which was 12 meters high and 7 meters wide. Its entire body was constructed from gold, so the walls would often flicker with a yellow sheen to them. Occasionally, hints of several seals could be seen flashing on the sides. Underneath the palace, there were 36 four-limbed ape gods, each of whom was 3 meters in height. They were currently supporting the flying palace over the ocean. The 36 tamed ape gods were all wearing heavenly winged battle armor, the best developed armor on the central continent. With that armor on, they were carrying the enormous flying palace over the ocean with great speed. They were moving at a height of several hundred meters and at a speed of 280 km/h. Li Yunmu was sitting on the main seat in the flying palace. On his side was an extremely stunning female with a seductive physique, while outside the flying palace, on the platform were their welcomed guests. Near the walls, a group of women and men stood in 2 rows while holding large swords. They were the 8 shadows, Li Yun, Li Feng, Li Dai, Li Tian, Li Mei, Li Lan, Li Zhu, and Li Ju. All of them now had true identities, and those were of the disciples of Li Sect. There was a small desk placed to the right of Li Yunmu. It was filled with many fruits and wine. On a chair near it, a black-clothed and masked person was sitting. He remained sitting quietly, not saying anything. But the invisible pressure exuded by him was extremely profound and could cause people's hearts to shake in fear. Li Yunmu was quite baffled at this time. He didn't know why Battle Sage Vega had adopted such an appearance. Perhaps, he could guess part of the reason behind it, but not all, so he didn't bother himself too much about it. That's right, the black-clothed person was Battle Sage Vega, and the flying palace had been also arranged by her. Today, this defender goddess of the central continent had personally come to escort Li Yunmu. In her words, she wasn't Battle Sage Vega now but would be acting as the mysterious Li Sect's senior for the time being. Good God! This time, even if Li Yunmu hadn't intended to raise the flag of Li Sect, since she was already here, there was nothing he could do about it. Apart from this, his 6 followers Lin Jian, Demon, Barbarian Niu, Nangang Gongzi, Underworld Hand, and Devil Monkey were riding outside on enormous phoenix dragons, each of which were 5 to 6 meters in height. 6 halted Fluxers divided into 2 groups of 3, one group on the right, the other on the left, were guarding the enormous flying palace moving toward the Black Dragon Island. As they moved in such a domineering fashion, the squads dispatched by other powers hurrying toward the Black Dragon Island raised their eyebrows one after another. Chapter 258, Black Dragon Island. Black Dragon Island was currently the center of the whole world's interest. As time went by, more and more contestants and powers behind them came to this place. Black Dragon Island was unusually large. When overseen from the sky, it resembled an enormous fiendish black dragon entrenched in the vast expanse of ocean. At the western edge of the Black Dragon Island, the region which looked like the Black Dragon's head with a ferocious mouth, all the powers were gathering. The Human Alliance, Fluxor Association, as well as the 6 transcending powers War God Temple, Divine Religion, Bloodline, Sea God Palace, Frontline Heaven, and Barbarian Shrine were all present. These people representing the greatest powers of the New Age had gathered here some time ago. The Human Alliance was represented by the highest power from each of the continents. These Fluxors who could overturn the 6 continents with just a word were sitting on the main seats of a stronghold created not long ago, their expressions solemn, mouths closed. The headquarters of the Fluxor Association had dispatched 4 elders who were sitting besides the representatives of each continent. The 6 transcending powers were sitting on the seats behind them in no definite order. Each transcending power had dispatched a senior representative, and the presence excluded by them made it clear that all of them were at least senior domain sages. Apart from this, there were 10 more extremely formidable people with quite unusual presences who had the qualifications to sit atop the platform. These were the representatives of the top 10 most powerful sects on Earth, and Chao Tian's sect master was among them. Yet the formidable entities like the 10 most powerful sects had barely obtained the qualifications to stand on this platform and nothing more. None of the sect masters were weak, each of them was at least a domain sage, but it wasn't enough. The ruling powers of the 6 continents, Flux Association, the 6 transcending powers, and the top 10 sects were powers that dominated the entire world and controlled the fates of all people living on it. And now, all of them had come here. All the representatives dispatched were extremely important people, and from this, the importance of this year's Continental battle could be seen clearly. It was simply the most important Continental battle in the history of Earth. Underneath the platform, there were flags and banners of many groups. Near them stood large but orderly groups of people adorning distinct clothes and waiting patiently for what was to come next. More than 100 powers and clans had come. Within the groups, there were both seniors who formed the core as well as the youngest generations, such as all disciples and other members. Ambition and excitement could be seen in everyone's eyes. At the outer edge of the powers who had neatly arranged themselves, there was another large group of Fluxors, but it was in a complete disorder. They had come here in groups of 3 or 5, or perhaps in pairs or by themselves, and were scattered at the outermost perimeter. Even if the number of people who had come didn't cross 100,000, there were certainly at least several 10,000s of them with all sorts of cultivation levels. Among these, the majority of people were Flux disciples, but some Flux masters had also come. There were also a few Flux sages concealing their strength. This outermost group of people weren't related to any power. After learning what was happening, they had rushed over to watch a lively scene. If anyone looked up, it wasn't difficult to discover what was happening. After all, the Black Dragon Island was a point of convergence at this moment. One group of people after another was coming toward it from all around the earth. As time continued to pass, the number of people entering the island continued to grow and the number of powers landing on the ground grew larger as well. Suddenly, an official representing the Human Alliance loudly announced, "Central Continent's Sword Sect's Lord Sword Sage has come personally." Bang! At this moment, all the powers as well as the enormous crowd of people began to stir. Sword Sect's Lord Sword Sage had unexpectedly arrived in person. Besides the 6 representatives of the 6 continents, for the time being, this was the first quasi-deity level character who had arrived at the Black Dragon Island. Sword Sect wasn't one of the top 10 most powerful sects. It was only an ordinary sect of the central continent, but it couldn't be said to be completely ordinary because this low-key sect had a quasi-deity sword sage as its leader. Among the battle sages, he was a person powerful enough to obtain the title of sword sage. He was in existence with formidable strength. Instantly, the 12 people sitting on the platform stood up and began to move in the direction where sword sage had landed to offer their greetings. As for others, their blood began boil. Normally, they would see a quasi-deity every couple years at best, but today, 7 of them had appeared in public. Quickly, Sword Sage's group arrived near the island and descended in front of people waiting to greet them. Sword Sage hadn't brought many people with him, just 6. The group was led by a middle-aged man who seemed around 40. He wore quite ordinary clothes and had a sword hanging by his side as he led the 6 people of the Sword Sect. After being greeted by many people, they settled on the platform and made their camp. An ordinary sect didn't have the qualifications to step onto the platform, but a quasi-deity level character was a different thing. Many people were standing on their toes, trying to get a look at the majestic sword sage whose name was famous in the whole world. However, the platform at the center was too high, so many people couldn't get a clear look. Look, that cold-faced woman wearing white clothes should be Ling Shuang. A true daughter of heavens. I hadn't expected Sword Sage to personally escort her here. This scene is really too intoxicating. The flying swords under their feet should be the flying sword pellets exclusive to the Sword Sect. This brother is quite experienced. Yes, they are the flying sword pellets which can only be congealed by Lord Sword Sage. Reportedly, their fastest speed reaches the speed of sound and they have an extremely high price, but there's no market. Soon, Sword Sage's people joined those of other major powers and began to wait calmly for the Continental battle to begin. Before long, the announcer again declared in loud voice, "Desolate Continent's mammoth barbarian king has arrived." Before his speech was finished, a black-colored copper ship appeared in the distance. This ship was 300-meter long and 70-meter wide. Traveling by its side was a formidable monster with relatively fast speed. One instant it was still several kilometers away and the next it had already arrived under everyone's noses. The crowd looked at the enormous ship that had just landed and saw 100 people come out one after another. Each barbarian was taller 2.5 meters and had a muscled body. They walked on water with large strides while guarding 2 silhouettes, one large and one small. It is Mammoth Barbarian King. He's just too terrifying. He's 5 meters tall in his normal state, and his height goes up even more when his strength increases. That should be Mammoth Barbarian Wuya. He is 3 meters tall, and reportedly his strength is on par with Man Tian's. Soon, Mammoth Barbarian King stepped onto the platform and greeted others while Mammoth Barbarian Wuya led his guards composed of 108 barbarians toward the group behind. As the start of the Continental battle came closer and closer, one after another, many powers arrived in succession. At this time, Li Yunmei was also approaching the Black Dragon Island, which was once a forbidden place for humans, in his flying palace. Chapter 259, Turning Rumors into Truth. It was as if what the spectators had imagined was coming true. Before long after Mammoth Barbarian King had led Mammoth Barbarian Wuya onto the shore, the announcer's voice could be heard again. Desolate Continent's Northern Barbarian King has arrived. Northern Barbarian King? Man Tian's father has arrived, then he will definitely be participating in the Continental battle. Everyone was listening with rapt attention, feeling that they were very fortunate. At this moment, of the 4 barbarian kings of the desolate continent 2 had come here. And the descendants of the 2 people had come to the stage in succession. While Mammoth Barbarian King had arrived on a ship from the south, Northern Barbarian King, leading Man Tian and the others, was approaching from the north side. At the coastline, a black dot was growing in size. As it got closer and closer, it became increasingly larger. When everyone looked at this object, all of them cried out in surprise. Mammoth Barbarian King's 300-meter-long ship was shocking enough, but the domineering manner in which Northern Barbarian King was coming caused people to release a muffled cry of shock. Far from the coastline, there was an enormous black whale. On it, 6 people were riding. Although this wasn't as grand as what Mammoth Barbarian King had done, the enormous whale on which the 6 were riding astonished everyone. It was an underworld sea beast. This underworld sea's enormous whale beast was more than 100 meters in size and floating on the surface of the ocean. When all people aboard it came to disembark, the extremely frightful pressure released by the beast caused many fluxers who were standing nearby to retreat. Underworld sea beast was a special title for evolved sea beasts. If one insisted on comparing them with evolved beasts on land, then the only ones equal to would be S.H.A.D.O.W creatures. That whale was a S.H.A.D.O.W beast. Most of the people hadn't expected that Northern Barbarian King would be capable of subduing a S.H.A.D.O.W beast and turning it into his mount. It must be known that every single one of the evolved beasts which could wield the title of Underworld Sea Beast dwelled in the depths of the ocean, tens of thousands of meters under the ocean surface. No one doubted Northern Barbarian King's strength, but for someone who was a Barbarian King of dry land to have the power to make a sage beast from the depths of the ocean submit to him was unbelievable. He truly is worthy of being titled the youngest and most powerful Barbarian King among the 4 Barbarian Kings. Yes, apparently Man Tian is so tyrannical because he inherited his father's genes. Soon, everyone saw a bald barbarian with a strong build step upon the platform. From close up, this Northern Barbarian King looked even younger than everyone had imagined. Just based on his outer appearance, he didn't look more than 30 years old. If someone didn't knew that he was the father of Man Tian beforehand, they would instead think that he was Man Tian's elder brother. Northern Barbarian King, who was seen as the youngest Barbarian King with the highest potential by the people of the desolate continent, had appeared in front of everyone today. They couldn't help but cheer loudly at him. Usually, they could never see these quasi-deity characters, but now, all of them were descending one after another. Not much later, the Snow Temple's Snow Sage also arrived with S.H.A.D.O.W and other disciples. All of them were riding on a huge ice bird which was emitting coldness so strong that the temperature of the Black Dragon Island dropped even under the scorching sun. It was said that this ice bird was also a sage-level evolved beast and the guardian beast of Snow Temple. Yet now, it was being used by the Snow Temple's battle sage. After this, Tyrant Zhang, who had vanished without any trace for some time, appeared with one of the other barbarian kings. Tower Barbarian King followed behind Tyrant Zhang when they entered the Black Dragon Island. Their group was extremely small, consisting of only 3 individuals. And among them, one was the Ride. It's a Cyclops from the innately powerful Cyclops clan of the 7th dimension. According to rumors, once a Cyclops reaches adulthood, it can compete against ordinary sages just by relying on the power of its flesh. Tyrant Zhang and Tower Barbarian King were sitting on the giant creature's shoulders. It was several tens of meters tall and was crossing the ocean in large strides. Each of its steps caused large amount of ripples to appear on water's surface. In this way, this enormous Cyclops passed the ocean and stepped onto the island. Northern Continent's Zhongshan family has arrived. One of the 5 largest families of the Northern Continent, the Zhongshan clan, arrived with many clan members. Zhongshan Onling was leading them. However, there were no cries of surprise or cheers this time. Even if they were one of the largest clans of the Northern Continent, the announcer only made a declaration once. At this time, a flying palace twinkling in black and gold appeared in the distance. Central Continent's Li Sect has arrived. The announcer suddenly declared. Central Continent? Li Sect? Who the F***ck is this? Central Continent had little more than 20 sects, and none of them were called Li Sect. For a period of time, many people were looking over dumbfounded. But then, something crossed their minds, and a disbelieving expression appeared on their faces. Dang, Central Continent's Li Sect? Shouldn't it be the mysterious Li Sect of Li Yun, Li Feng, and Li Yunmu? Some person suddenly exclaimed loudly. Most people couldn't believe that this was happening for real. Although the rumors of the mysterious Li Sect were taken to be true by many people and even many powers long ago, after a proper investigation and authentication, it had been dismissed. Everyone had gathered a lot of information, and in the end couldn't find any proof that the Li sect actually existed. Some people online were audacious enough to speculate that the rumors were spread by Li Yunmu himself. And they had even come to guess that apart from Li Yunmu himself, who had appeared in front of everyone, Li Feng, Li Yun, and the others were fakes. Because none of them had never appeared in public. Their existences could only be found in the dimensional battlefield. Due to this theory, a few continents had even petitioned that dimensional battlefield system should be checked. Many people were worried that someone who was responsible for maintaining the virtual dimension's brain had taken control of it. However, the investigation revealed that the brain was still functioning normally, which cleared that part at least. But until now, the large powers and organizations still didn't believe that the mysterious Li sect backing Li Yunmu actually existed. However, today, they had arrived. Instantly, all the people on the Black Dragon Island couldn't help but turn to look at the flying palace which had appeared in the horizon. The palace was neither a sage beast nor an enormous ship like what the other major powers had used. Surprisingly, it was an extremely large runic tool. The black golden palace was emitting a faint golden light. It originated from the beautiful and mysterious runes carved on the building's surface. It's the runic language of true seventh dimension. Someone said with extreme seriousness. At the same time, many others noticed 36 four-limbed ape gods supporting the flying palace underneath it, and all of the people shouted out in unison, "Ape gods!" Chapter 260, Zhan Wuya. One person immediately cried out upon sensing the pressure emitted by the 36 ape gods. They're really ape gods, yet I feel like all of them are more formidable compared to what I imagined. If just a few ape gods were used, then perhaps it wouldn't have attracted everyone's attention, but 36 ape gods had come at once. And all of them were completely docile, which left everyone flabbergasted. It must be known that the number of wild ape gods was quite low, and they were fond of living in groups, so finding even a single ape god in the outside world was very difficult. The most important thing was that not only did the ape gods had virtually unkillable bodies, they were one of the few monsters who could practice human cultivation methods. In other words, not only did the ape gods have a tyrannical bloodline, their flexibility and intelligence were also extremely outstanding. That's why when 36 ape gods showed up carrying a flying palace, everyone was stunned by the scene. Suddenly, a voice came from the top of the platform. Everyone recognized its owner as the sect leader of Unfettered Sect, one of the top 10 sects. Don't be mistaken, though, these aren't ordinary four-limbed ape gods, but the six-limbed ape gods who had awakened their innate bloodline. Six-limbed ape gods who had awakened their innate bloodline. This time, the entire Black Dragon Island became speechless. The majority of Fluxers simply didn't know anything about the six-limbed ape gods who had awakened deity bloodline. However, no one dared to suspect the words of the Unfettered Sect's sect master because the guardian beast protecting Unfettered Sect's mountain was precisely an ape god. Because of it, the sect master was certainly the #1 expert on ape gods among the people present at the scene. Currently, there were about 100 ape gods on the mountain of Unfettered Sect, and each of them was imparted with the core secret technique and battle skills of the Unfettered Sect. The top 72 among them were relatively formidable, each of them being roughly equivalent to temporal layer experts. The famous 72 Ape God Mountain spell actually required these 72 ape gods to activate and operate. At this instant, even the sect master of Unfettered Sect revealed a gaze of longing towards the 36 six-limbed ape gods. Although only 4 of the 6 limbs of these awakened ape gods could be seen, after the explanation of the sect master, everyone immediately noticed that on each flank of these ape gods there was a wart. However, these 2 warts hadn't yet grown out to form the third pair of arms. Some people couldn't help it and quickly began to input the keyword six-limbed ape god into a search bar online and went to learn more about them. As more and more people read the articles regarding such creatures, they cried out one after another words like impossible, how could that be, and must be exaggerating. An ape god who had awakened its innate bloodline was more formidable compared to a four-limbed ape god. The reason for this was why people couldn't believe what they were reading and thought that the authors were exaggerating. The first thing was that ape gods who had awakened their innate bloodline had even more formidable talent for cultivating human secret techniques. Because of their innate blood and formidable body constitution, their aptitude was considerably higher, so when they cultivated the techniques imparted by humans, their speed of cultivation would be unusually fast. Thus the first reason behind their abnormal situation was that ape gods who had awakened their innate bloodline cultivated faster compared to ordinary ape gods, since they possessed a more formidable aptitude. The second thing was that these ape gods' flesh was even more terrifying. Ape god was a race who was classified among those which possessed formidable flesh. After awakening their innate bloodline, they would continue to grow, from ordinary 3-meter 4-limbed ape gods to 5-meter 6-limbed ape gods. On top of that, just because of the awakening, their combat strength would undergo an enormous qualitative change. The third major thing was that the 6-limbed ape god could grow a pair of ape god wings in the future. Then, they wouldn't be restricted to land and even the skies would become part of their territory. After everyone looked at the materials online, they could only decide that the stuff there was considerably exaggerated. After all, the 36 ape gods carrying the flying palace were all 6-limbed ape gods. Moreover, according to the information online, the potential of the ape gods wasn't limited to just this. If they completely awakened their innate bloodline, they would become an 8-limbed ancestral god ape. If there was even a single ape god among this group who was likely to completely awaken its innate bloodline and become the 8-limbed ancestral god ape, that would be even more shocking. For according to the information online, the combat strength of an ancestral god ape was even greater than that of ordinary battle sages. In everyone's opinion, this was a complete exaggeration. However, it made it clear why all the main powers and even upper-tier sects like Unfettered Sect placed so much importance on nurturing ape gods as their guardian beasts. Only now did the majority of the Fluxers learn that ape gods had the potential to awaken their innate bloodline. If Unfettered Sect could nurture even one 8-limbed ancestor god ape, then even if they had to pour more than half of their sect's resources in it, they would still be making a profit. Battle strength surpassing that of ordinary battle sages? This had to be an exaggeration. Quickly, the flying palace came closer to the island. When the 36 ape gods supporting the giant structure descended on the Black Dragon Island, the crowd could observe them more easily. No one now had any doubt about them being 6-limbed ape gods, for everyone could clearly see the bulges on their sides as well as outside the battle armor on their backs. This was the power of the rumored Li sect? A flying palace of the 7th dimension and 36 ape gods who had awakened their innate bloodline? There were also 6 halted Fluxa riding evolved rooster dragons, which were known as phoenix dragons. There is no mistake, this is certainly that mysterious Li sect which Li Yunmyu belongs to. I hadn't expected it to really exist. When the Fluxers saw Lin Jian, Barbarian Niu, and the others defending the descending flying castle, they became aware that Li Yunmyu had finally arrived. Originally, he hadn't attracted the attention of many people, when compared to barbarian kings and battle sages. After all, many Flux sages had come today, and as for the newly rising powerful characters among Flux disciples, they were endless. But when everyone saw Li Yunmyu arrive with this sort of force, they couldn't help but feel shocked. This is the movement of the mysterious Li sect. Quickly, look, when did Nangang Gongzi become Li Yunmyu's follower? Suddenly, many Flux disciples with good eyesight saw an extremely familiar figure among the 6 halted Fluxers. Formerly 3rd-ranked halted Fluxer had now surprisingly become a follower of Li Yunmyu? What the F***ck is going on here? If they were shocked when Li Qinghong, who was ranked 9th, and Lin Jian, who was ranked 10th, had become Li Yunmyu's followers, then now they were left completely baffled by Nangang Gongzi also joining them. Li Yunmyu had killed the 2nd-ranked halted Fluxer Devil and subdued the 3rd-ranked Nangang Gongzi? In a split second, everyone's gazes turned to Zhan Bei, who had arrived here long ago. At this moment, Zhanbei was also caught off guard by this event. He had never expected that even with his strength, Nangang Gongzi would still be subdued by Li Yunmu. Instantly, many contestants who had hurried to the Black Dragon Island looked solemnly at the flying castle and Li Yunmu who was disembarking from it. They could sense a hint of danger coming from Li Yunmu at this moment. I think I should have strangled him at the Moro Mountain Tenebrous Hidden Domain at that time. What a pity! When Man Tian looked at Li Yunmu who was gradually coming out of the flying palace, a hint of regret rose in his heart. He hadn't expected that Central Continent's Li Yunmu would mature so quickly, in less than 2 months. In just that time, he could surprisingly cause Man Tian to feel a little threatened. So this person is Li Yunmu? The person who obtained the qualifications to participate in our War God Temple's trial by fire this year? Asked a youth with narrowed eyes. He was standing under the platform, among the people from the transcending powers. Yes, the temple originally didn't have much hope from him, but I heard that a lot of elders have changed their attitude and are now thinking highly of him. He is even being considered as your replacement. Right now, it looks like he wants to enter the game, but not as a chess piece, a beautiful female standing by Zhan Wuya's side replied unenthusiastically. Her name was Ji Wuxin. She and Zhan Wuya represented the participants from War God Temple and were considered as the most outstanding characters of this generation. Humph, a chess piece is a chess piece. A replacement is only a replacement. He won't succeed. No one can replace me, Zhan Wuya. Not to mention that now I have also overcome my heart's devil. Right now, even I don't know how formidable I am. A hint of coldness flashed through Zhan Wuya's eyes while he was sizing up Li Yunmu who was standing at some distance.